Good day. I'm Tricia Paoletta. I'm a partner at the law firm of HWG. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And I'm pleased to be with you today to present this webinar on the Metaverse. When I first approached the Asia-Pacific Satellite Communications Council, I thought there might be interest in understanding, amongst the membership, the state of play of standards development for the Metaverse, both from a policy and a technical perspective, since at some point the members might be requested by their mobile operator or fixed wireless partners whether their services or networks are Metaverse ready. So we thought there might be some interest in understanding what those specifications might be, how they might impact operational models of the membership, design of devices, and the like. Joining me on this webinar will be my partner, Adrian Fowler, who heads up our privacy practice, as well as Mike Zeitlin, who is a very well-regarded technology consultant. He is an engineer, so he actually has some of the deeper technical understanding of these issues. And he's also served in a number of senior positions in leading tech companies, including those that are following the development of the Metaverse, contributing to the development of the Metaverse quite intensively. So the Metaverse, of course, is one application that relies on artificial intelligence. There's many, and we are seeing increasing interest by a number of governments, including the United States, on the ethical and responsible development of artificial intelligence and applications that rely on them. So we thought it would be a timely discussion to maybe focus on one Metaverse or one application that relies on AI, but a number of our points could relate to the broader discussion that's underway in a number of countries on how to most responsibly develop AI applications. All right, so without further ado, I will turn it over to Mike Zeitlin to kind of dig a little deeper on what actually is the Metaverse. Thank you.
Tricia, for this introduction. So the topic that is often asked is, what is the Metaverse? And specifically for the Asia-Pacific satellite community, how that may impact your decision-making process, for the services that you provide, for the policy that impact your decisions. So there is a really still developing concept where you can find a lot of different answers. But holistically, it is, the Metaverse is this environment where the physical and digital worlds blended somehow together into one that is kind of more often called now extended reality, and where the content and the digital entities somehow interact. So XR, or extended reality, is an umbrella term for this virtual reality and augmented reality and any combination of these realities in between, because there can be, some combinations that not directly addressed, such as digital twins, or new type of interactions that we may not even envision today. Applications still being developed, but fundamentally it is a blend of this physical and digital worlds that bring this whole new concept, a new paradigm that definitely Asia-Pacific community can want to be addressed. So in that metaverse environment, users consider physical actions somehow reflected, transposed into the digital world, and then their virtual actions somehow reflected in the physical world. And it can be either completely consuming virtual reality, where you enter the virtual worlds, such as, for example, the digital worlds promoted by the Metaverse, where you entirely see your avatars and avatars moving, or it can be some combination of them in a way that you can drive your car and see the augmented image superimposed on your glasses on a driving window. But obviously, a lot of other ways is where you haptic, your motions can, for example, can be transposed into the control of the avatars and virtual world. So every physical interaction that happens between between the real move and real motion, between real haptics and the digital worlds, it's holistically called the metaverse. So there is a lot of interest today and still a lot of debate today what it means for the service providers, for the operators. But I think it's pretty clear that over time, this extended reality will bring some of the applications to consumer homes, to enterprises, and to realm of industrial applications. It is more probable that enterprise and industrial application will come first, and then for the gaming and for the other users, consumers will be involved too. And the metaverse itself, even that's interaction of the digital and the real world itself, is a combination of many other technologies. It's based on many other technologies. Obviously, we mentioned AR, VR, but artificial intelligence is a big part of that. How this machine learning, how the extended reality behaves and what is shown to the consumer or to industrial use very much can be planned or can be dependent on the AIML, the blockchains, the sensors and haptics scenarios, the broad use of the cloud and edge computing, and many other technologies. So all of this can become a broad use of the metaverse, and we still observing how the various applications come to existence. So one of the applications that, for example, that you often hear is about digital twins. So what is digital twins? So it's not entirely new concept. People modeling systems for many years. When they build something, new satellite system, they build a simulator for that. But basically, now with the digital twin, you can actually model your entire system, or you can actually represent the physical asset in its cyber twin, meaning that you can entirely use and develop and absorb the copy of your machinery, the copy of your system, the copy of human behavior in the cyber twin world. And that's obviously works through guaranteeing digitization of physical assets. That's how the digital world is kind of entering to the digital twin. But the digital twin is a broader concept, because not just it gets the digitization of the physical assets, but it actually also reconstructed behavior. It's massively projected to use AI and ML in building that. And then you can apply all the analysis and all the modeling based on your AI ML that exists in the physical world to your digital twin and observe how it goes there. And so both assets, digital twin, like physical assets, and the cyber twin needs to generate and present the XR content for complex physical assets. And there are so many examples of the XR is already being developed in the medical fields, for example, in the machinery, where you actually can completely represent the complex machinery in the virtual world and observe its behavior. The humans aspects of that, the societal aspects of that, all actively being developed in the digital twin, and you can often see the terminology applied to various complex tasks that can be much easier and in much more accelerated way to be resolved and observed in the virtual world.
Thank you, Mike. And you can imagine, because of all the potential for metaverse applications and use cases, governments are beginning to look at this. Some looking at this in a very positive light, seeing it as a driver of their national economy, or perhaps a differentiator in terms of giving them a foothold on innovating, in particular, the strategic sectors. Others are somewhat concerned and cautious about, again, the ethical development of one of the technologies underlying the metaverse and so many other applications, AI. The U.S. Department of Commerce has recently requested comments on how to develop artificial intelligence in a responsible way, and how to develop perhaps accountability measures, and whether those should be done through the private sector or through a public-private partnership, audits in place. But so you have a range of responses, but most countries who are thinking about this do understand this is a significant development technologically, and these proceedings are taking place. So the building blocks of policy and, of course, regulation are already being put in place. So, if your company is looking at the metaverse or AI broadly as a opportunity, it is important to be involved. Early engagement is definitely the key. And to drill down on some of the fora where countries are already looking at it, we'll start at the top, I suppose. The intergovernmental body of the International Telecommunication Union, their standardization sector, the T sector, as it's called, has convened a task group on metaverse. And then this particular task group is open to both private sector and government alike. And they are looking at metaverse, and we'll deal with it down further on in the webinar when we talk about some of the standards for them. But so you do have already an international discussion that is underway in China, in the Asia Pacific region. They are definitely looking at the metaverse as a potential for growth and innovation. It's one of their 4 frontiers of exploration. They've invested quite heavily to develop companies who can excel in the metaverse. 10 large leading companies, and also trying to seed smaller entrepreneurial companies, 100 of them. And the goal is to develop 100 different products by 2025. And they even have already developed a teaching center using metaverse technology, so with immersive technology. And one application is to develop patriotism in China. South Korea, also in the Asia Pacific region, has launched the K Metaverse. They did that last year even, and also have invested in this space, $185 million. And they have a ambitious plan, a 5-year plan to build the City of Seoul's digital twin. You can imagine that's a very large city, certainly by U.S. standards, and that's going to be quite a program. Saudi Arabia has also decided that metaverse is a key area for their development, and they've launched the Vision 2030. And one of the projects within that is the National Gaming and Esports Strategy. And they believe that this strategy will develop quite a bit to their gross domestic product, over $13 billion US, and create almost 40,000 jobs, in the next 7 years at this point, by 2030. UAE has also focused on the metaverse. They've decided to measure their economic success, their GDP, but with gross metaverse product metrics. And they're going to be using the metaverse to kind of export their culture, explain their culture to the world, and attract both local and international metaverse companies, and also with the goal of producing a number of jobs. In their instance, they're looking at creating virtual jobs, 40,000 of them by 2030. And they also have decided to actually to walk their walk and actually have the Ministry of Economy's headquarters in the metaverse. And like Seoul and like South Korea, they will be building their digital twin, Dubai's digital twin, in the metaverse, and in Sharjah, which is will be a virtual transaction center in Sharjah. Now, at a less grand scale, we do have certain U.S. states that are developing policies, generally on AI, but certainly would be applicable to the metaverse. And I'll turn to my partner, Adrian, to give a little more context on what U.S. States are doing, certainly leading states in this space.
So there are a number of US state and federal agencies that are adopting policies to either promote or rein in the metaverse, both specifically and on topics that are going to impact the metaverse. For example, California is requiring software and online operators to design their new products and services that are that where it's reasonably foreseeable that minors will use the service, those products and services be designed in a way that is age appropriate for the minors who are using the service. It's one of the hottest areas in regulation, both in the US and internationally, and will certainly have broad applicability in the context of the metaverse. At the federal level, there is a bit more focus on the metaverse specifically. FDA, which is the United States Food and Drug Administration, is responsible for clearing and approving medical devices before they are sold within the United States. The FDA has adopted regulations dealing with the use of virtual reality devices in the medical context. The FTC has also been looking at the metaverse from a policy angle and a competition angle. For example, they recently blocked Meta's bid to acquire Supernatural. FTC is also focused on hidden advertising and the extended reality of Supernatural, and has a more general focus on hidden advertising and extended reality generally. And as Tricia mentioned, NTIA is also looking at gathering public comment and developing strategies on AI accountability. In other words, strategies to make sure that AI is trustworthy and fair, and ways to measure that and potentially make those measurements public. While it's not specific to the metaverse, the application certainly is there because so much of the metaverse will be driven by AI, and the same sorts of accountability principles will be applicable to the metaverse space in addition to the AI space. And the US government is likely to leverage those strategies in both the AI context and the metaverse context, even the components of the metaverse that aren't leveraging artificial intelligence. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mike, to talk a little bit about ITUT.
Thank you, Adrian. ITUT, which is the one organization within International Telecommunication Union responsible for the standardization and intergovernment agreements on those standards, created at this just a couple of months ago a new task group focused on the metaverse. It's a reflection of the importance the metaverse for the governments and their way to jointly explore challenges and opportunities for accessible, sustainable, and inclusive metaverse. So one of the main goals there is to collectively discuss how the metaverse can be used to achieve the ITU Sustainable Development Goals, accelerate digital transformations. But this focus group is also brings a lot of industry together with the governments to provide inputs and discuss the relevant topics that can help accelerate the work of the ITU focus group on the metaverse. And we'll discuss later that there was a broad activity within 8 working groups that have been created to pursue various goals that of joint interest for the government and the industry. Important debate within the ITUT is also the role of the metaverse in transforming consumer experiences and business models across the industries. And that is important because it actually puts a lot of content and regulatory focus that may be of interest to the broad industry and specifically for the satellite operators within the Asia Pacific community. And obviously the ultimate goal of this development is to foster and accelerate development of the interoperability standards for the open and inclusive metaverse. So that is really the ultimate goal for the ITUT. It's important that the metaverse will be open, that various consumer and industrial segments can be able, within different countries or within the borders of different countries, will be able to access the content, and obviously the content needs to be moderated and secured in a way that each country can be assured that it is safe to use for the, obviously, for the citizens of that country. So this is why ITUT created this group and pursuing actively this engagement.
So now we're going to switch gears to talk a little bit about why exactly governments are interested in regulating the metaverse, not just why they're interested in investing in the metaverse, and some of the possible regulations that could come down in the coming decades and years that are starting to evolve right now. The primary ones are around national security, privacy, and data security. As Mike mentioned, interoperability, but also competition. Governments also have a very strong interest in user safety and content moderation, specifically for children. And then also there's been a growing chorus of government support for the accessibility of technology for individuals with disabilities. That focus is likely to persist into the metaverse as well. So let's go through each of these one by one. As Mike mentioned, the metaverse is an AI, ML powered technology that is going to involve an unprecedented volume of data. That will involve an unprecedented volume of data output, but also an unprecedented volume of data collection. As a result, governments across the world see the metaverse as both an opportunity for enhancing their own data assets, but also a challenge in terms of protecting the privacy and data security of their citizens. So as you see today, outside of the metaverse context, data localization and encryption backdoors for law enforcement will become a very big issue in the development of the metaverse. Right now, you have a number of countries that focus on ensuring that operators store personal information and other information about their citizens within their nation states' borders in order to facilitate law enforcement access to that information should law enforcement wish to review it. On the other hand, you have other nation states that are pushing against data localization requirements and looking to have the ability to have data stored across the world. As satellite operators, this will obviously impact you all and within the Asia Pacific community, because the more data localization requirements that exist, the possibility for obligations of duplication of information and duplicate storage of information may arise. This is particularly problematic in light of the fact that there's an unprecedented volume of data collection involved in the metaverse. Storing all that data in multiple places will be very expensive. And so one of the things that satellite operators in the Asia Pacific community will want to look at is ensuring that any data localization requirements do not fall on satellite and other backhaul operators, and potentially considering whether to encourage governments to move away from data localization requirements at all. Similarly, there's been a longstanding debate about encryption backdoors for law enforcement. So enabling law enforcement to access encrypted data by essentially giving them a key to a backdoor that allows them to automatically decrypt that data, assuming that they have appropriate authorization to do so. Many within the technology community are against these backdoors because they create inherent security risk. However, They also potentially provide opportunities for law enforcement to respond quickly in the event of emergency scenarios. They also increase opportunities for government surveillance. In terms of the Asia-Pacific satellite community, one of the things that you all may want to focus on as you are engaging with the public policy arms of various governments is making sure that you properly educate regulators on what the backhaul role is and what backdoors can and can't accomplish. So for example, in the metaverse context, there will be huge streams of data flowing through satellite operations and other mechanisms of backhaul. However, actually processing that data into a usable format will involve other key pieces of the puzzle. So making sure that regulators understand the limits on essentially requiring satellite and other backhaul providers to provide these sorts of backdoors for law enforcement will be key to make sure that we don't wind up with policies that are disadvantageous for industry, as well as potentially not helpful for law enforcement. Another major national security concern is equipment manufacturers that are linked to state actors. In the United States, we've seen FCC focus on this outside of the satellite context on certain routing and network equipment that is that has been produced by companies that are allegedly tied to the Chinese government. You may see similar concerns from the US and from other nations about other countries in terms of the equipment that is used as part of the communications infrastructure that will power the metaverse. It's important as satellite operators to stay abreast and potentially engage on these challenges to ensure that the multi-million and sometimes multi-billion investments that are made into hardware technology don't wind up being equipment that needs to be ripped out of your satellite and replaced with an alternative technology in order to continue to operate in certain markets. This is more background knowledge and directly applicable to satellite operators, but it's important to know that within the metaverse, there are unique challenges for anonymization and erasure. And what that means is that there are a wide variety of existing regulatory requirements that come into play anytime that you have data that can be attributed to a particular person or device or IP address. And with the amounts of data that will be available in the metaverse, making that data truly anonymous, which is how many companies currently comply with these laws, will be quite difficult. And erasing this data might be quite difficult. As a result, government actors may turn an eye towards limiting the amount of data that industry actors are able to collect and store in the first place. And it'll be important for members of the satellite community to pay attention to this and to avoid any sort of constraints that will prevent the satellite industry and the Asia-Pacific community from being able to collect the personal data that it needs to collect about end users, about its own employees, about particular pieces of equipment that are linked to an individual. Any of that data that satellite operators need to be able to gather, we want to make sure that regulations don't impede or make it more expensive to collect and retain and process that data in the ways that are necessary for satellite operators to do. Moving to the next topic of regulatory focus, governments across the board are interested in interoperability and competition. It's currently a very strong focus of regulators in other domains outside of the metaverse. For example, there's a strong EU regulator focus on competition. They have issued exorbitant fines on tech companies that the EU views as engaging in anti-competitive conduct. They're also under the GDPR, which is the European Union's data protection regulation, and similar laws. Data subjects, or individuals whose data is collected, they have rights to data portability. In other words, rights to take their data out of one system in a format that can be used in another system, wherever possible to do so. That is going to be a very interesting challenge in the metaverse, given the amount of data involved, and thinking through the design and the ways to comply with these pre-existing laws, or ways to think about necessary changes to existing laws to make them feasible without hampering the development of the metaverse and the provision of backhaul network connectivity for the metaverse. Governments are also very focused on ensuring that protocols are technology neutral. Again, we've got the ITUT, who is looking at a number of different aspects of that, but we may see other regulators getting involved there as well. Also, the interoperability of hardware for compatibility with competitor software. This is more at the end user stage. So someone who is trying to enter into the metaverse using a particular piece of equipment and a particular piece of software. But as providers of network connectivity, the satellite industry needs to be aware that of this as a background consideration that regulators are going to be focusing heavily on. Metaverses also will likely interact with one another and potentially have add-ons, the way that currently a number of platforms, including Zoom, allow integration into other software platforms. For example, Zoom can integrate with Microsoft Outlook and its calendar. The same thing is likely to develop within the metaverse context. And which companies operate as the gatekeeper for determining which applications, which add-ins can be brought into any given metaverse is likely to be an area where regulators have great focus. We see this in various governments' focus on app stores and the gatekeeping role that that operators of app stores play in terms of what applications are actually contained in the app store. We can expect to see similar focus going forward from government regulators in a variety of jurisdictions. Last, interoperability of safety protocols is going to be key. As we'll talk about momentarily, there are a lot of user safety concerns in the metaverse environment. So developing safety protocols that can be transferred from one metaverse to another, between one operator and another, between one service provider and another, so that there is universal safety features built into the metaverse is likely to be an area of government focus in the near term. So for example, as Mike mentioned, the metaverse often involves a physical manifestation of what's going on in the digital world. You can experience some degree of sensation, some degree of touch that is facilitated by a vest. When you have minors, obviously involved, there are strong personal autonomy and safety considerations involved with personal touch of minors. So having some sort of universal safety mechanism or universal safety signal where minors cannot be touched would be an area of great interest to many government regulators, and we anticipate that there being some regulatory focus on this area in the coming months and years. Turning to more generally user safety and content moderation, the current regulatory issues will be magnified greatly in the metaverse context. As we see in the internet space, in social media, and whatnot, there is a balance between user anonymity with preventing violations of law, violations of acceptable use policies, and the like. To what degree will the metaverse rely on user reporting versus top-down detection of violations of acceptable use policies and of tortious conduct or of criminal conduct? And what role will AI or algorithms play in detection? And additionally, and this will be especially key for network operators and backhaul providers, such as satellite operators, is the question of tort or criminal liability for third-party conduct. In other words, if someone uses the metaverse to do wrong, what obligations do companies have to stop it? Which companies have an obligation to stop it? And if they don't stop it, then what happens? Does a company that has an obligation to stop some sort of safety infraction from going on have to pay money or face criminal liability in the event that they fail to do so? One key point of engagement for the satellite industry and the Asia Pacific community will be to ensure that regulations evolve in a way where that distribution of potential liability comes about in a fair way on to industry actors that actually have the ability to police that sort of conduct, rather than imposing that sort of liability on folks and companies who are ill-positioned to do the policing. As mentioned before, the safety considerations, the content moderation considerations are amplified even further when it comes to children. Right now, we have a number of regulators, both legislatively addressing problems of children's safety in social media, as well as doing it by regulation. There are responsible design requirements in the UK and California, and a number of US states as well. A key problem to making sure that children are protected, however, is to find out who the children are and where they are, and which actors are children and which are not. Accordingly, there will likely be regulator focus and potential industry standards development around age verification and how to figure out when someone who is operating in the metaverse is a child and when they're not. There's also currently a lot of regulator focus on the mental and physical health of children in social media, and we expect that to increase exponentially with the further deployment of various metaverses. Last, we see existing laws that deal with the accessibility of technology for individuals with disabilities. For example, websites in many jurisdictions are legally required to be compatible with screen readers to enable individuals who cannot read their screen because they are blind or visually impaired, and have that interact with screen readers so that the content of the website is read aloud to the individual. Those laws are likely to expand into the metaverse as well. And multisensory environments will present new challenges and new opportunities for individuals with disabilities. Right now, the main forum for international standards, for industry standards in the accessibility context, is the WCAG. And so that is an additional area to watch, not for metaverse-specific standards at this time, but rather for the development of standards that could potentially impact the future development of the metaverse. And with that, we'll move away from WCAG standard settings back to some alternative forms of standard setting.
Thank you, Adrienne. Yeah, so we've been discussing some of the policy fora and regulatory discussions that are underway and various issues, both in the U.S. and Europe and in Asia, and those have been at the policy level. But obviously, there's some technical implications as well. And there's a number of standards bodies that are looking at this, both intergovernmental, industry, very forum specific or application specific. But as Mike had already reviewed, the ITU-T task force on the metaverse is technically a standard setting body. They are certainly looking at policy level issues, but they are also addressing in their working groups, which Mike will later review, some technical aspects and architectural aspects of the network relative to metaverse applications. So again, if your company is engaged in the provision of certain services or working with the mobile operators or delivering services directly, you'll want to be involved in those ITU-T task force discussions, which are underway right now. In addition to the intergovernmental / private sector forum of the ITU-T, there is 3GPP. They're looking in their current release on different technology aspects to support the metaverse. 3GPP, of course, it's really an amalgam of different standard setting bodies, but with the mobile industry coming together to develop technical specifications on mobile broadband, including both the 5th generation, 5G and 6G, where we'll really start seeing metaverse applications take off. And then there are some very focused industry, metaverse focused standards forums that are beginning to develop, such as Metaverse Standards Forum and the Open Metaverse Foundation, the latter addressing some of those interoperability issues that Adrian referred to, both in terms of the data, portability, and as well as coming in and out of different metaverses. So I'll turn it over to Mike to kind of drill down in what the ITU-T task group, working groups are focused on. Thanks.
So this slide actually very much depends on how Adrian positioned it. Basically, what are the various concerns that the governments may have with regard to metaverse, and she outlined a large variety of the subjects. So this working groups, the 8 working groups that were organized within the ITU-T metaverse, try to tackle these various subjects that Adrian talked about, and this policy subjects uniquely for the metaverse are not just can be addressed within the policy or rulemaking, because these are very kind of technically dependent subjects. How specifically the interoperability work, how the integration will work, what are the economic regulatory competition between the areas. So these are all broader technical subjects that the industry and the regulators should come together and address. And that is the reason why it works. The work is a focus of the ITU-T, because the regulators, around the world, and a lot of them in developing countries as well, really want to understand, what is the proper way to address this new paradigm of metaverse, how to best protect or manage or monitor the population, and obviously the focus here on minors as well. So these working groups, obviously, maybe for the Asia Pacific satellite community, there's a lot of work, but some of them actually more important than the others. But overall, there is terminology and definition group, application and services. I think that should be one of the focus, because that's where the industry, satellite industry, can actually get together with their regulators in the countries that they serve and engage on what kind of services can we provide to all the satellites, what kind of applications, and based on that, actually be prepared to meet government needs, or be aware of and engage with the governments how that needs to be done without impacting the business and bringing large capex and opex efforts by the industry. So architecture and infrastructure is obviously going to define what are the elements and what are the functional decomposition of the metaverse. Working group 4 will focus on integration, and that is very important subject. And then just mentioned that. So how the virtual and real world integrate, how you make sure that integration can be compatible between across borders, across countries, across equipment. Working group 5 going to address a very important topic on security and protection. That is actually one of the key subjects, how to make sure that, and one of the touchy subjects, how find the balance between the protection on one side and government ability to monitor or at least get address the risks, but at the same time keep the industry free from any restriction regulations and flourish with the new application that they bring to the market and consumers. And obviously, work group 6, I think it's very important for the industry, is this whole economic, regulatory, and competition. That is the subject that will have a broader discussions and probably less technical, but has a large impact on the developing regulations and developing views of the governments. But these are the topics, in my view, that that obviously the industry should be involved, because engagement with their regulators will actually allow the industry probably will get less impact if taken at the early phase, as opposed to when the governments will kind of envision high risk, and then later the industry need to catch up and work with the governments kind of to implement that could have a broader impact on the operations or even the capex of the satellite community. So when we talked about standards, we mentioned, and Tricia mentioned a lot of standardization development. Virtually every standardization organization and standard setting organization, or even specification organizations, have their group for focus on the metaverse. Next Alliance in US and every ITU group around the world, IEEE, ETSI, and other organizations basically all have their efforts, subgroups focused on the metaverse. But one topic that Tricia mentioned is this also the 3GPP, the partnership that is focused on the mobile community, studying metaverse service in release 19, and the System Architecture 1 group recently approved the study on localized mobile metaverse services. It's SEED to the 4. And these metaverse services would involve coordinating input, perception, sensing data from different user devices, sensors, haptics, cameras, and coordinating output data to different devices at different destinations to support the same applications. So this is another focus area for the community. It may not be impacting the satellite community directly, but many of the satellite community actually carrying the mobile data as a backhaul, and it may have impact on the capabilities of the backhaul, that the impact on the timing response, the impact on the capacity. So that's one of the areas that I think they should keep an eye on development.
Thank you, Mike. And of course, for those of you who are following the 3GPP discussions on non-terrestrial networks, which include satellite, of course, as well as the high altitude platforms, already in release 17, the technical specifications for 5G and 5G Advanced are looking at integrating satellite links into the provision of 5G. And that, of course, is progressing into release 18 with some additional study items they have. And of course, as Mike just reviewed in release 19, looking specifically at Metaverse specifications to make more seamless that transfer of data, right, from the real and digital world. So you've been very generous with your time and following along here. So we won't take up too much of your time, but we did want to leave you with these key points. Governments around the world are concerned about the development of the metaverse, particularly with its ethical and privacy protective aspects. So that they're looking, and then these regulatory fora are, of course, proliferating. Policy decisions are being made here and now in your countries. We gave you a few examples of some of the Asian markets that are looking at the metaverse as great growth and economic development and innovative projects. But not all governments are approaching this way. And regardless, you should be involved in those discussions. And of course, if you're not involved, right, decisions can be made and negatively impacting your, well, not just your profitability, but also the operating model that might differ from how you have been planning to operate for the next several years out. So we do encourage you to get engaged in your home market discussions, or of course, many of you are, particularly satellite operators, international by definition. So you do want to be engaged globally wherever your services or your revenue are going to be impacted. So with that, we will wrap up. Our contact information is available. Please let us know if you have questions. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions, or if you have questions on how to get more engaged or what proceedings are taking place in your markets of interest, please reach out. And with that, we wish you a good rest of your day.
Sure.